let's look at an example of why a digital strategy is so important and how it can impact your ultimate execution. So I'm going to use the example of a hospital here, and the example isn't the hospital pictured here. I just chose a picture. But when I evaluated the strategy of this hospital, so an agency came to us and said, hey, we're running social media for a client, and we're really not sure if it's working. And so we looked at their Facebook page, and what we found was that, it was a hospital, and they were posting generally about the kind of things that a hospital would post about. So they posted about health. They had some promotionally stuff about featuring doctors and stuff like that. And then they would just share sort of like general interest health tips. And so my first question was, well, what's the goal of this page? What are you trying to achieve? And I read the goal, and the goal was drive traffic to the website, reach people on Facebook, and build a positive reputation for the hospital. That was what they said they were trying to do. So they wanted to get traffic to their site. They wanted to reach as many people as possible and build a positive reputation. So they had 3 goals, and their content, well, none of it seemed that off base for a hospital. There was really a lot of different stuff going on. So when I read their strategy as well as their objectives, the first thing that I asked myself is, well, what would cause somebody to choose a hospital? So if I'm thinking about it, why is a hospital on Facebook? What is their higher level goal, right? So why would a hospital join Facebook? And in our live trainings, we use this as an example where we'll ask the audience, well, why would a hospital be on Facebook? What do they ultimately want to have happen? Well, what they want at the end of the day is they want new patients. So they're not in the business of just having people know their name. They're in the business of getting people to walk through the doors when they're sick. So first we can say, well, this is what their goal is. Now, the next question I have is, okay, well, what would lead somebody to choose one hospital over another? And so think about this for yourself. What would cause you, if you had to go to a hospital tomorrow for something, hopefully not, but what would cause you to choose one hospital over another? It could be something like the location. It's probably related to the reputation. Maybe it's something that a friend suggested to you. Maybe it's just the first thing that comes to mind, which in marketing is known as top of mind awareness, right? It's the first thing you think of, oh, that's where I should go. That's often where you want to go. So what you want to think a little bit about is, okay, we know we want to get new patients, but what are the drivers of new patients? What are the things that get people to choose us when they have a need for a hospital? And those are the strategies. Those are the strategies that you'll want to focus on, right? Is the things that cause somebody to achieve your goal. So if your goal is a new patient, what are the things that cause somebody to become a patient? So after thinking about it a little more clearly, we could define their strategy instead of their original strategy, which was our goal is to get people to the website and to reach people on Facebook, we can get more specific now. And we can say, okay, the goal overall is to get new patients. That's what they're really out there to do. Now, you don't want everything to say, hey, feeling sick, come on down. So just because your goal is maybe a little more transactional doesn't mean you approach it in a tactical or transactional way, but it's helpful to keep in mind why you're there to begin with. The second thing is, well, what's the strategy? So if you think about the strategy is what is your approach to getting new patients? So the approach in this case, we could start with, well, we want to build our reputation as the best in care for specific areas. Or we may have a secondary strategy, which is top of mind awareness, right? We know the more we get our message in front of people in a positive way, the more they think of us, the more they trust us, and the more likely they are to come here. So your strategy is how you do it. And you typically would have more than one strategy, which is fine. You may only have one, but many businesses have more than one. The objective then would be a specific measurement of success. So I want to reach 25% of the market on Facebook with relevant messages. And then the tactic is going to be the Facebook page with health leadership content and Facebook ads. Now, when you look at the Facebook page and say, is this page working? You have a lens to evaluate it against. Not just, well, am I reaching a bunch of people, but how many people and are they in my target audience? So one of the other problems we see with poorly defined strategies is that when it comes time to measure the results, we say, well, I don't know, it seems to be okay, we're reaching a bunch of people, but people can't truly measure, well, is that success? What were we out to achieve? If you set a clear objective, we want to get 25, so if there's 100,000 people nearby who could choose us, we want to reach at least 25% of them. Now I can say, well, how am I doing in my reach there? And is that enough to achieve the goal that I ultimately want? Now, for something like a hospital, you could also take this down to be a little more specific, right? So this would be your overarching way to build your goal, strategy, objectives, and tactics for your business. But you actually could build this out for a more specific challenge as well. You could say, well, maybe we just launched a new cancer care center, and our goal is to get more cancer patients in. Then your strategy could be, maybe it's just awareness that this new facility exists. So you can, and you could go on and say, well, what would the objective be and what would the tactic be? But the idea is that by thinking this through up front, you're much more likely to be successful. The problem with the first strategy was that many of the things that the social media team was doing wasn't even likely to lead to new patients. Here's what I mean by that. One of the things we saw on their initial strategy was that their goal was to drive traffic to the website. And my first question was, well, is website traffic correlated with somebody choosing the hospital? Right? I mean, sure, if I'm searching for a hospital, website traffic would be correlated, but do you need someone on Facebook to actually go to your website? And what are they even going to do there? Because the hospital website didn't really have content. It was literally just information about the hospital. So like, what would somebody do when they got there that's going to really increase their favorability of your hospital and drive them to become a patient? And we couldn't really answer that question. So once we started thinking more strategically, we realized that some of the objectives we set didn't really make sense. And this was also evident in the execution. So when I first read the strategy and I looked at, well, what are they posting on Facebook? Guess how many times they linked to the website? 0 times. Because you can't just say like, oh, and by the way, we have a website, click here, right? You would need to have a really good content strategy. Some hospitals do, but this one in particular did not. So the other challenge was that even if this was their strategy, their execution didn't match it. They weren't posting things that were likely to drive people to the website. So they were unlikely to ever achieve the objectives that they had set out. This is one example of why it's so important to really think through your strategy in advance, because then everything comes together nicely. It's clear why you're there. Your execution and the types of content you're going to post, the types of ads you run, and even your budget can be more clearly defined when you have a clear objective of what you want to achieve. And then it's much easier to measure the success of your plan when you have that sort of tight strategic approach.